guys, I am Joy and you're watching my YouTube channel Universal Joy. In this video basically we'll be talking about a different procedure which is related to physiology, that is called the basic principle for the pulmonary ventilation, or in another word that is also known as basic mechanism for the respiration. So I'm going to be writing that word down so that each and every single time I explain you can get that word to be observed very frequently. Okay, so I'm going to be writing down basic mechanism for respiration. Okay, now we all are acquainted with this terminology called respiration. What does it refer to? Basically, in simple terminology, when you are breathing in and when you are breathing out, that is called respiration. However, having said that, this is a very unacademic way to explain what respiration is all about, but you got to tell it in an academic way. So respiration is a physiological process by which we get to see the transportation of the oxygen from the outer atmospheric air into the interior part of the body for the oxidation of the ingested food particles, and where we get to see the elimination of the carbon dioxide and other volatile end products which are excreted out of our body into the outer atmospheric air. So this is a very difficult type of definition, but I have to dump it down in easy words. So bear with me, I'm going to be dumping it down in easy words. So respiration means when you are breathing in air and when you are breathing out air, both these things put together is called respiration. That means if this is our alveoli, lung alveoli, oxygen from the outer atmospheric air is coming through the respiratory tract, and let's just suppose this is our blood vessel, and here this blood vessel is enriched in carbon dioxide. Now there will be an exchange of this oxygen from the lung alveoli into the blood vessel, and this carbon dioxide will be excreted out of the blood vessel into the lung alveoli, and through this lung alveoli it will be excreted out of our body tract, and it will be excreted into the outer atmospheric air. So this phenomenon, this exchange between oxygen and carbon dioxide, is a part of the respiration. So basically it's called external respiration, which will come across later on. But having said that, just for the time being, you just keep only one thing in mind, that the exchange between the oxygen and carbon dioxide is known as respiration. And in academic way, in academic method, if you are asked what do you mean by respiration, then you got to say respiration is the kind of process where there is the involvement of the transportation of the oxygen from the outer atmospheric air into the interior part of the body for the oxidation of the ingested food particles, and where we get to see the elimination of the carbon dioxide from the interior part of the body into the outer atmospheric air. This entire mechanism is called respiration. Now this respiration consists of two different steps. Okay, this respiration consists of two different steps. One is known as inspiration, whereas the other is known as expiration. So inspiration and expiration, both these things put together ultimately makes this respiration terminology, which is a broad word. So inspiration, that means when you are breathing in, that is called inspiration. That means if I'm breathing air into my interior part of the body, this is called inspiration. And if I'm throwing the air out of my respiratory tract, this is called expiration. Okay, so inspiration, again, it has got two different subdivisions. Inspiration can be achieved externally, that's called external inspiration. Okay, and this inspiration can be achieved internally, that is called internal inspiration. So inspiration, if it is achieved externally, that is called external inspiration, which can be observed with the naked eye and which can be observed superficially. Basically, when you are breathing in and when you are breathing out, that's called expiration. Basically, that's called external inspiration. Okay, and when the exchange between oxygen and the carbon dioxide takes place at a cellular level, which cannot be observed in our naked eye, that is called internal respiration. So basically, I'm going to be giving two more examples for your clear conception. So basically, you see, if this turns out to be our lung alveoli, okay, and if this is our blood vessel, we know our human being is a net carbon dioxide producer. That means our human being generates carbon dioxide and it is not capable of generating oxygen. Okay, that means in our blood vessel there will be carbon dioxide in more and more concentration, and in the lung alveoli through the respiratory tract from the outer atmospheric air, oxygen will be shifting into the lung alveoli. That means the lung alveoli has got higher concentration of the oxygen in amount, and the blood vessel has got higher concentration of the carbon dioxide in amount. Now there will be a diffusion of the carbon dioxide from the blood vessel into the lung alveoli, so that the carbon dioxide can be excreted out of the body, and it will be thrown into the outer atmospheric air. And from the other end, oxygen will be shifting from the lung alveoli, and it will be diffusing into the blood vessel, because through the blood vessel our cell will receive this oxygen for the purpose of the ATP generation. And we know ATP is a basic biological coin, which is very much required component for the synthesis of the energy. That's the major reason why this oxygen will be shifting from this lung alveoli into the blood vessel, and from this blood vessel it will go to the cell. So this exchange between the oxygen and carbon dioxide is known as external respiration. So basically, when you are breathing in, that means you are taking the air in, and when you are breathing out, that means you are throwing the carbon dioxide out of your body. So this exchange, what you can observe superficially, is called basically it's called external respiration. And talking about the internal respiration, which cannot be observed superficially, it occurs at a cellular level. That means if this turns out to be our blood vessel once again, and if this is our cell, what really happens is our cell ultimately it produces carbon dioxide. That means our cell produces carbon dioxide, but this cell is badly in need of the oxygen, which it cannot synthesize on its own. So it has to get oxygen from the outer atmospheric air. So this blood vessel is highly enriched in the oxygen. That means through the lung alveoli, as we have already mentioned earlier, through the lung alveoli, the oxygen diffuses into the blood vessel, and through this blood vessel, oxygen right now will be diffusing into the interior part of the body. That means prior to the diffusion of the oxygen from the blood vessel into the body cell, there was the production of the carbon dioxide, because the cell has already produced carbon dioxide because it wants to synthesize ATP. Okay, and on an attempt of doing that, it has already produced carbon dioxide. So there is the production of the carbon dioxide, but this cell is badly in need of the oxygen, so it will take the oxygen from the blood vessel and throw this carbon dioxide from this cell into the blood vessel. Okay, now this exchange is taking place at a cellular level. Okay, and in between the cell and blood vessel, there is definitely interstitial fluid in the interstitial medium or interstitial space. Now this exchange between the cell and blood vessel, or in another word, the production of the carbon dioxide and utilization of the oxygen by the cell at a cellular level, that is called internal respiration. So basically, in different word, you can say the utilization of the oxygen and the production of the carbon dioxide between the cells and by the fluid medium. Here the fluid medium is interstitial fluid. Okay, this entire phenomenon is known as internal inspiration, which cannot be observed superficially. So you have already come across the two basic concepts as to the inspiration. Okay, another different thing that you really need to be acquainted with is which one of these two processes are active process. Which one of these two processes is active and which one of these two processes is passive. Now the process which is badly and desperately in need of the muscle contraction is known to be an active process. That means inspiration is the active process, expiration is the passive process. Expiration is not an active process. Why? This is a question which is asked frequently to the students by the tutors. Why is inspiration called to be an active process? Inspiration is called an active process because in quiet expiration, the diaphragm needs to be contracted, and on the other hand, the external intercostal muscles also have to be contracted. And on the other hand, in forceful inspiration, three important muscles, for example, if I name out more specifically, sternocleidomastoid muscle, serratus anterior muscle, and scalene muscle, all these muscles have to be contracted during the forceful inspiration. As there is an active contraction of muscles during the time of the inspiration, whether it be forceful inspiration or whether it be smooth or quiet inspiration, every time whenever there is a process called inspiration, muscles do contract to accomplish the task of inspiration. That is the major reason why this phenomenon or this process is always called active process. But during forceful expiration, there is the involvement. It's not that there is no involvement of the muscles contraction during forceful expiration. Definitely there is the contraction of the muscles during forceful expiration, but during quiet expiration there is no involvement of any muscles activity or any muscles contraction. That is why this expiration is called to be a passive process. This is the question which is asked frequently to the students, especially by the tutors during exam or during even viva. So you have to inculcate this answer into your mind for eternally, so that you don't forget it going into the future. Now this was the basic phenomenon as to the inspiration and expiration. Now I have to talk a little more on the basic mechanism of the pulmonary ventilation, or in other words, that is called respiration. So basically in our brain there is a center that's called respiration center. Let's just suppose this is the respiration center. This is the respiration center, and when it becomes activated or when it becomes stimulated, it sends signals through two different nerves. When this respiration center situated in our brain is stimulated, it sends signals through two different nerves. One is phrenic nerve, the other is intercostal nerve. So let us just write them down. One is through phrenic nerve and the other one is through intercostal nerves. Now, the name itself will suggest you what this phrenic nerve is all about. This is related to diaphragm, and intercostal nerve is related to the intercostal muscles. So, the moment respiratory center becomes activated, it sends signals through phrenic nerve, and on the other hand, simultaneously, it also sends signals to the intercostal nerves. The moment phrenic nerve receives the signal, as I've already mentioned earlier, this is related to diaphragm. So, it sends these signals to diaphragm. That means, let's just suppose this is our diaphragm. Before getting the signal, the diaphragm was in this shape, and the moment it gets the signal, the diaphragm will right now be contracting. Okay, again, before getting the signal, the diaphragm was on its proper shape. The moment it receives the signal from the phrenic nerve, right now it will be contracting, and the moment the diaphragm contracts, it descends downward. That means it is pulled downward. If it was originally like in this shape, then after the signal it will be almost like it will be pulled downward and it will be descending downward, and as it descends downward, so the thoracic cavity's vertical diameter will be increased. Okay, now if the diameter is increased, then volume is increased, of course. And from the Charles-Boyle's law, we have already come across that the volume is always inversely proportional to pressure. So if volume is increased, pressure will be reduced. If pressure is increased, then volume will be reduced. They have always an inversely related relation. Okay, so same phenomenon here will be applied. Here, due to the descending down of the diaphragm, the vertical diameter of the thoracic cavity has increased, and the moment the vertical diameter of the thoracic cavity has increased, it indicates that there is an increase of the volume, and this increase of the volume will lead to the decrease of the pressure vertically. Now this is a one way of reducing pressure. So our ultimate result is that there will be the reduction of the pressure. Okay, however, having said that, this is only one way of reducing the pressure. On the other side of the picture, this intercostal nerve right now will be sending signals through to the intercostal muscles. Through the intercostal nerves, the signals will be sent to the intercostal muscles. The moment the intercostal muscles get the signals from the intercostal nerve, what really happens, the intercostal muscles will contract, and due to the contraction of the intercostal muscles, rib will show some movements. First one is bucket handle movement, the other one is pump handle movement. So I'm going to be showing you practically so that you don't forget it going into the future. Let's just suppose this is a rib. Okay, and we know the anatomical positions of the ribs, it lies obliquely downwards, so it will be like almost in this way. But the moment intercostal nerve sends signals to the intercostal muscles, ribs will be elevating and it will be depressing downward. So the ribs will keep on elevating, it will keep on depressing downward. This is called pump handle movement, and due to the elevation and the depression of the ribs, the anterior posterior diameter of the thoracic cavity will be increased. Okay, and on the other hand, the ribs are going to be also showcasing the transverse diameter. That means there will be a movement of the ribs transversely, and this phenomenon or this movement is almost akin to the movement of the bucket handle movement. Okay, that means whenever we leave the bucket, there is a movement of the handles, transversely. That is the almost kind of like a movement which is almost similar to the movement that is exhibited by the ribs when the ribs showcase the movement transversely. Okay, that means again I'm going to be repeating for your betterment. Through the intercostal nerve, signals go to the intercostal muscles, and intercostal muscles contract, and due to the contraction of the intercostal muscles, ribs showcase two different types of the movement. One is pump handle movement, the other is bucket handle movement. This is the pump handle movement, and due to this pump handle movement, anterior posterior diameter of the ribs or the thoracic cavity is increased, and due to the transverse movement, the transverse diameter, or due to the bucket handle movement, the transverse diameters of the thoracic cavities is increased. Now both these things combiningly, simultaneously put together will ultimately result in the increase of the thoracic cavity's volume. So previously we got the vertical diameters to be increased, and right now we have got the transverse diameter and also anterior posterior diameter to be increased. Now these three will ultimately result in the increase of the net volume of the thoracic cavity. So I'm going to be writing down the net results only. Okay, let's just suppose after all these events our ultimate volume of the thoracic cavity has increased. That's why I'm writing it down, that there is an increase of the intrathoracic volume. This increase of the intrathoracic volume will result in the decrease of the interthoracic pressure, because I've already mentioned earlier this V is always inversely related to P. That means if V is increased, P will be reduced, and if intrathoracic pressure reduces, that means all the pressures present in the thoracic cavity will also be reduced. What are the pressures that exist within the thoracic cavity? Basically there are three or four types of the pressures, out of which we will learn only two types of the pressure in this video. One is intra-alveolar pressure, another one is intrapulmonary or intrapleural pressure. Now for example, this is our lungs. Okay, this is our visceral pleura drawn in the green color, and this visceral pleura is always attached to the lung wall, and that's the major reason the lung gives a glossy kind of look. Anyways, so visceral pleura is always in contact with the lung, and the pleura has another layer that's called parietal pleura, which is slightly away from the visceral pleura, and this parietal pleura is adjacent to the chest wall. Okay, now what really happens is that when the chest wall is expanding due to the contraction of various muscles, when the chest wall is expanding, that means the volume is increased. Because we have already come across and we have already learned that the volume will be increased due to some contraction of various muscles, that means the chest wall will be expanding. And if the chest wall expands, that means the structures adjacent to the chest wall will also be pulled away towards the side of the chest wall. Again, volume is increased, that's why chest wall is increased, or chest wall is expanding outward. That means if this is our chest wall, okay, this dotted marks represents its chest wall, then this will be expanded outward, and this parietal pleura, as it is adjacent to the side of the chest wall, so the chest wall is going to pull the parietal pleura away from the visceral pleura. Now if this phenomenon happens, then what will ultimately result in is that there will be an increase of the pleural cavity. The space between the visceral pleura and the parietal pleura is known as pleural cavity. Okay, so due to the expansion of the chest wall outward, the parietal pleura is pulled away from the visceral pleura by the chest wall, and this will ultimately result in the increase of the pleural cavity's volume. So you see, previously it was in this shape. After the expansion, it will be almost like this. That means it will grow outward, and this cavity will be increased in volume. Okay, that means you see there is an increase of the intrapleural volume. And if intrapleural volume increases, then of course the pressure existing in this intrapleural space will be reduced also. That means the pressure prior to the expansion of this pleural cavity was 5 centimeter of water. At the onset of all these events, the intrapleural pressure was minus 5 centimeter of the water. But the moment it expanded, the pressure will be falling down from minus 5 centimeter of the water to minus 7.5 centimeter of the water. So you see, there is more negativity inside the pleural cavity. Same thing is going to be observed in case of the pleura or in case of the lung alveoli. You see, lung alveoli are present within the boundaries of the visceral pleura, or in another word you can say the lung alveoli are present within the lungs. Okay, that means if the lung is expanding, if the lung expands because of the increase of the volume, then of course pleura or the lung alveoli will also be expanding outward. And if that happens, that means the space in the lung alveoli will be also increased. And if there is an increase of the lung alveoli, then there will be a decrease of the lung alveoli pressure also. And that pressure is called intra-alveolar pressure. So at the onset of all these events, intra-alveolar pressure was at 0 centimeter of the water. But after the expansion of the intra-alveolus, or after the expansion of the alveoli, the pressure will be definitely falling down from 0 centimeter of the water to minus 1 centimeter of the water. Now definitely you could see both in alveoli and also in case of the pleura, there is more negativity arising in the pressure as compared to the outer atmospheric air. And we know the direction of the airflow. Where does it move to? The air always moves from the higher pressure to the lower pressure. As you have already seen, there is more negativity in the pressure. That means there is a reduction of the pressure inside the lung within the frontiers of the lung. So there is more negative pressure inside the lung and more positive pressure outside the lung. So what really happens is that the air will keep on moving inward from outer atmospheric air to the inner part of the lung. That means from the outer atmosphere, the air will will start coming into the lungs through the respiratory tract. That means this increase of the volume and this decrease of the pressures, which consists of decrease in the intra-alveolar pressure, and decrease in the intrapulmonary pressure, intrapleural pressure rather I should say, pleural pressure, ultimately generates more negativity in the lungs, more negative pressure in the lungs. And this negative pressure will allow the outer atmospheric air to flow into the lungs through the respiratory tract, and ultimately we will be able to breathe the air into our lungs. That means inspiration will take place. Now this is the mechanism of the pulmonary ventilation. First, muscle contraction will take place due to the respiratory center's stimulation. Then intrathoracic volume will be increased, and then then the pressure existing within the thoracic cavity will be decreased, which will consist of the reduction of the intrapleural pressure and reduction of the intra-alveolar pressure, and both these things will generate a negative pressure within the thorax, and this will allow the air of the outer atmospheric air to come into our lungs through the respiratory tract, and will be able to inspire air. Now this is the phenomenon which is definitely applicable in case of the inspiration only. Now same thing will be applied in an opposite way in case of the expiration. Now if we apply the same rule in an opposite direction, then that phenomenon will be applied for the expiration. This was all about the respiratory system. This was all about the basic mechanism related to respiration. Hope you have liked the video, and if you have liked it, then be sure to be with our channel by getting yourself subscribed to our channel and by hitting that bell icon below. So bear with us, be with us, and stay blessed and stay tuned to our channel.